Okay, everybody, so welcome back. So now I have the swing of the ever popular Ian Poulter. So let's have a look to see what Ian does. So Ian here has a hybrid in his hand. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to analyze just the way he stands, his posture, his alignment, and whatnot. Obviously, with his alignment, we don't exactly know where he's trying to aim the ball, but we can get a pretty good sense there. So let's have a look just to see if his feet, knees, and shoulders are all pointing in the one direction. All right. Looks all pretty good. Shoulders are all fairly much parallel. If anything, I would say his left foot is just a little bit forward of his right foot, which it may mean that he's trying to hit a bit of a draw too, so we don't 100% know. Okay, in terms of his posture, nice straight back there. Okay, again, he actually holds the club a little closer to his body there. Okay, so we had Patrick Cantlay before, who was a little bit further away, but he's got his hands a little bit closer. Now, let's see what happens on his takeaway. Okay. So let's stop it when the club reaches parallel to the ground. So as he moves the club starts to move. He looks like he's turning his hips fairly much straight away. And if you watch his right hip, it starts to turn behind him, which this is what I really preach during the lessons, is that you don't just want to turn your hips. You want to make sure your right hip is pulling back behind you. You just don't want to turn your hips and sway your body to the right. So you got to make sure that you just feel like you're pulling your right hip back, almost like if you got into a golf posture and you imagine as if you're going to start a lawnmower. It's the same kind of action. You would pull the cord back. Imagine pulling the cord with your right hand in a golf posture. And as you're pulling the cord, you're allowing your right elbow and your right hip to come back together. So that's the same kind of feeling that you should feel in your golf swing. Is to feel as though your right hip is coming straight back instead of swaying onto your right foot. You're ideally trying to keep the pressure inside the right foot as you turn your right hip back. So that avoids any sway and gives you a nice turn. Okay, so first position here, we can see here that unlike Max Homa, Patrick Cantlay, the club head is pretty much close to his hand position here. There, so this is a lot more neutral position on the takeaway. The club head here, it's a little bit closed. We often say that we want to have the club face angle matching the spine angle at this position. So we can see here that the club face angle is probably a little bit closed to his spine angle. All right, so let's keep going. Get to the top. All right, so we get to the first position, and after that, we're going to venture into the second position. So Ian has really high hands here. So he tries to take the club through his right shoulder, which is pretty standard. And he has his hands very, very high there. Okay. It's very unusual to have the hands that high, because what tends to happen here is that the right elbow is tending to lift up a little bit more than normal. So usually what you want to see with your right elbow is the right elbow should be basically parallel to the ground. So you can see that the right elbow is just a little bit higher than parallel to the ground. He also looks a little bit steep here, meaning that his left arm is pretty much going through his neck. So usually at the top of their swing, their hands would actually be a little bit further over here, and their hands would be lower. So the left arm would be a little more under the neckline, whereas his left arm is pretty much going straight through, nearly through the middle of his head. Okay. All right, so that's just something to note here. It's not necessarily going to end up in a bad result here, but we'll see what tends to happen. You can also see there with Ian, his left foot actually comes a little bit off the ground at the top of his swing. So his left knee's moving quite a lot there, because we can see that because there's quite a big separation in here. So Ian kind of has more of an olden day swing, meaning that the guys who used to swing back, 20, 30 years ago, you would see a little bit of movement sometimes in their left knee, like Greg Norman, Seve Ballesteros. They would all tend to move their left knee, and they did that while not compromising their turn of their body. So you move your left knee as long as it's not compromising how you turn your body on the backswing and how your angles are with your head behind the ball at the top of the swing. Most of the time when people use their left knee too much, they don't tend to move their hips very well. But anyway, so you can see that Ian tends to do that. He lifts his left heel off the ground. Okay, we'll draw a line down to the ball. Okay, so now Ian's going to start dropping the club. So now Ian's really shallowing the club down. Okay, he's still getting that club now, just like everybody else that we've seen, just above that right elbow. Okay, so he's coming down. All right, so there it is there. So if anything, with that right elbow, we can see that the shaft is a little bit higher than some of the other ones we've seen. Now, it is natural for the shorter clubs like irons and hybrids to be a little bit steeper coming down compared to the driver, and that's because when the shaft gets longer, it does tend to flatten out the path even more. So if you're someone who does have the path quite low coming down, particularly with an iron, it would go down even more flattered in general with a driver because it's longer, it's more flexible and whatnot. So right now here, Ian is still in a very acceptable range coming down into the impact position. Okay, there's his right shoulder there, and there's his right elbow. So he is on the steep side coming down. All right. Need to come back down here. So yeah, still a little bit steep there. The face angle coming down is quite square, which is great. Yeah, so now we're getting into this position here. Now, with the club head in front of the hands now, just before he's about to hit the ball, Ian's definitely in a position here where he would fade the ball. So now he had a position very much like this coming up, where the club head and the hands were forming a pretty straight line coming back. He got his hands up pretty steep at the top of his swing with his left arm coming through the middle of his head. Now on the way down, he's coming down just a little bit steeper. So he's just above the right elbow, a little bit more than we've seen with the other tour players. Now let's see what happens through here. All right, so before impact, Ian is already level with the ball. So in this position here, Ian is going to more likely hit fades from this position. Now he's going to swing through. Yeah, so now he's really coming across to the left. You can see even the ball starting a little bit left as well. And I would dare say that that ball that you can see in the distance is going to start fading back to the right. Okay. So still a very good golf swing. It's a very free and fluid swing. And you can see this with Phil Mickelson. So Phil Mickelson actually, and Jack Nicklaus did this as well. With that left foot that comes off the ground, they lift their left foot up a little bit from the heel. And as they start down, it's almost like to start their downswing, they like to feel as though their front foot plants down straight away. And that really kind of sets up the downswing. So I dare say that's what Ian's doing here. He's kind of lifting it up a little bit and he goes, right, time for the downswing. Let's plant the foot down and that can start my downswing. So yes, Ian here has definitely a fade swing, and still there's nothing wrong with a fade swing. But even though he hits a fade, you can see here, even approaching impact, that the club never gets on the other side of the ball. It's still here it's level, very much level with the ball. And then he just pulls back to the left a little bit here. And that creates that fade shot. Okay. All right, so let's have a look at some other elements before we wrap up. Again, I like to look at the spine angle. Let's see what happens here. Ian pretty much just keeps his glutes on that white line there. He doesn't push back any further. Coming through impact. Okay, so you can really see he's got great rotation through the ball. His glutes are staying back. I can see his left glute at impact. And it's an important thing to note here too, is that his body, all of his body is left at impact. So his shoulders are aiming left. His hips are left, obviously. So he's very much hitting a fade and wants to hit a fade. So a lot of the time you'll see that at impact, that the shoulders will actually be square to where they were at the start. So here's where we're about, that's a little bit right. So here's where we're about there at the beginning. He's even left at that, even with his shoulder line. Okay, and you can see there with his right foot, he's just releasing it through. There, we saw Patrick Cantlay before. The Patrick Cantlay actually kept his foot on the ground and stretched his right leg until his hands reached his shoulder height. But Ian is really just releasing the right leg and knee through the ball. All right, guys, so that's the analysis of Ian Poulter. Still a very good golf swing, just a different way to do it at the top of the swing. He gets a little bit steeper coming down, and he swings a lot to the left, which creates that fade. But still a lot of really great things there with his spine angle that he rotates, and we can see his left glute and impact. Well, thank you very much, guys, and tune in for next time when I do some more analysis of other Tool Pros swings.